on this week's FAS TV. We're at Potatoes in Practice, one of the UK's leading field-based potato events held at Balruddery Farm near Dundee. We speak to a range of industry specialists to hear more about the latest innovations, opportunities and threats facing Scotland's potato sector over the next 5 years. If you would like to find out more about Potatoes in Practice or have questions about your potato business, contact the FAS helpline on 0300 323 0161.
So my name's Ian Tote. I'm the Director of the National Potato Innovation Centre and a scientist at the James Hutton Institute. I think profitability is always going to be difficult with price increases as they are. It's very difficult, but more specifically, I think pests and diseases are going to be a big cause of concern for the whole of the UK industry and beyond. With the loss of chemicals, we are going to have to find new ways of doing things. And I think that new potato varieties are going to be extremely important in the future to deal with these threats. We work a lot with trying to develop new varieties. We've successfully developed varieties that are pest and disease resistant, and we have those now going into the marketplace, and they're going to make a big difference when it comes to replacing the kind of control options that we had with chemicals. We're also working with biologicals, which are going to be very useful as part of a bigger IPM or integrated pest management control. I think that we all have to continue to talk together. I think that scientists and industry need to talk. I'm the director of the National Potato Innovation Centre, which is a centre specifically brought together to increase communication between science and industry. And I think that's going to be very important in the future, not just across Britain, but internationally. The James Hutton Institute, we have the new Crop Innovation Centre, which is a £62 million infrastructure building. We have lots of new innovation in that we think is going to make a really big difference to potato production in the future. We have new storage facilities for testing storage conditions. We also have a high throughput phenotyping platform, which is an option where we can grow potatoes in different climates effectively in our conditions, and then look at how they respond to these different conditions as a very rapid way to select for producing new varieties. We're also working very much with vertical farming systems to see how that can speed up the breeding process, and possibly in the future even produce seed tubers that can be very useful. One main reason is that there are no pests and diseases in these facilities, so you can keep them clean for a number of years.
My name's Kieran Maloney. I am a senior potato consultant. The company I work for is SEC Consulting, which is part of SIUC. And we're involved in the potato industry in a supportive and applied research capacity. So my job and the job of my colleagues in the potatoes team is to support farmers and companies that are involved in potato production with evidence-based and impartial advice. So that's what we do. So in the next 1 to 5 years, the biggest threat that I see to the potato industry is our changing climate. Really starting to see the effects of climate change now, warmer seasons, drier seasons. We're starting to see new and re-emerging pests and disease pressures. So there are some pests and diseases, for example, aphid-vectored viruses, which were historically at quite high levels, and then the industry got them under control, and we're now starting to see them to rise a little bit again. There's lots of theories as to why that's happening, but definitely the changing climate is one of them. So I think that's the biggest challenge in the next 5 years, is how do we maintain a productive system in the face of those new and emerging pest and disease threats. And that goes the other way as well. So in our conversations with growers, we get a really good sense of what the emerging problems are, what the biggest challenges are, what things are hampering productivity the most for them, and we can pass that back to the more fundamental parts of the industry to give them a steer on what might be most impactful for them to look at. And so I think that's our key role in trying to address these challenges. I think the wider industry can be better prepared for the future, I think primarily through collaboration. I think taking an interest is really, really important. You can get quite focused on what you're doing in this industry, whether you're a grower or a business involved in production in some way. But I think speaking to others, learning from others, not just in Scotland but further afield as well, because some areas of the world have a lot more experience in tackling some of the problems that are just starting to emerge with us. So I think collaboration for me is a real key to addressing these problems. It's only through sharing best practice and sharing experiences that the whole industry benefits. So I think that would be my main way we address these challenges. Yeah. I think there are lots of innovations. The one that we've seen in discussing sort of production with growers that subscribe to our advisory services is the use of optical technology in grading lines, and I expect to see that expanded in the future with pressures on labour availability and cost. I think that technology is really meeting maturity now, so I expect to see that deployed more widely, and also in other areas of the production chain as well. So not just at grading after the crop's been harvested, but perhaps earlier than that, as well. I'm thinking maybe sort of in-crop sensing, things like that. The other technology that we've really seen sort of reaching maturity is the use of drones within agriculture, so autonomous aerial vehicles. There are some developments looking at the application of plant protection products. There are regulatory challenges to that, but there are some really encouraging signs that'll become more and more of a feature as we go forward, and also the integration of the optical technologies into drones. So that's been used for a very, very long time, but I think if we can get to the point where, for example, groundkeeper mapping using an aerial vehicle or identifying particular areas of a field where there might be a nutrient deficiency or a particular disease, I think the technology is all there. It's just getting it into a form that's usable, and I think we're very close to that being a reality. So soil health and water usage and the demands the potato crop put on both of those features is a big challenge. I think for the industry to grow potatoes, you have to, there's a lot of tillage involved, there's a lot of movement of soil. There have been projects that have looked at ways that you could reduce tillage in potato crops. So that's ranged through from quite modest, for example, reducing some operations, maybe not bed tilling, for example, if it's not required, or destoning at a shallower depth. There've also been some more experimental approaches, for example, planting potatoes under mulch, and they all can work, but they're often involved with other challenges. So, for example, under a mulch and not forming a ridge, you take a significant yield penalty. I think for potatoes and soil health, it's about thinking about the rotation. So it's about thinking about what can we do to minimise soil disturbance as we're growing the potato crop, but also throughout the wider rotation, making sure potatoes are as spaced out as possible in the rotation, and then things to build soil fertility and structure in between potato crops. That gives the soil more resilience, so it will recover more quickly to an intervention. In terms of water use efficiency, I think looking at varieties. So varieties vary a great deal in terms of their requirements for irrigation in potatoes, and then looking at technologies for irrigation. So most of Scottish growers that do irrigate are using a rain gun, which is a pretty inefficient way to actually irrigate a crop, particularly in windy conditions in Scotland. It's amazing how uneven that irrigation can be. There's lots of alternatives available. There's a cost barrier, I think, to some of those, but that's where I would be looking primarily to try and see if we could adopt some of the alternatives, which are more consistent and have a much lower water use footprint for the crops. There's also technologies around that, such as support systems, digital support tools for better scheduling and things like that, and I think that'll all play an important role.
My name's David Kenyon and I'm head of SASA, and I'm also the Chief Plant Health Officer for Scotland, and I represent SASA, which is a division of the Scottish Government. So we have a dual role, both in terms of policy to support agriculture and particularly potatoes, so it's a big area for us, but also we do a lot of the testing and the administration of the schemes that support the seed potato industry. The biggest threat for me is still potato cyst nematode. We still have big issues in terms of getting appropriate control. We have an increasing area of land contaminated. And whilst we've had the recent PCN project led by the Plant Health Centre, we need to make sure that the information coming out of that gets landed with growers to better support them in managing this pest. For me, it's about making best use of the outputs coming from the PCN Action project. I think we need to better understand what we have on our farms and how we're going to manage that. We do need new varieties, we need resistant varieties, but we also need to be more integrated in how we approach these things. So it's not about having one thing that solves the problem. So we have to do better soil testing so we detect it earlier. We have to use better crops. We have to manage the land in between those crops better. So it's a multi-action approach that we need all farmers to be taking, because obviously the biggest worry is spread from field to field, and if you have a bad field, how you stop that contaminating the land all around it. We need to learn from others, so we need to be keeping an eye on what's being developed, not just in Scotland, not just in the UK, but in Europe as well. So we need to be broad, because quite often they will have the problems that we're going to face in a few years' time. So we can learn from how they've dealt with it, what they put in on farm, that's going to allow us to manage these things better. And a part of that is obviously for us to work with industry so we can promote best practice and make sure it's widely promoted across the industry. Our biggest focus from a policy point at the moment is making sure we can get seed potatoes back into Europe. Having lost that market when we had Brexit, it had huge impacts on the Scottish industry. So the promotion at the moment of the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement that was proposed last year, what we need to do is make sure that lands and that we get seed potatoes from Scotland back into European markets as soon as possible.
So I'm Dr. James Price. I'm a molecular plant pathologist and plant nematologist at the James Hutton Institute. My main role here at Potatoes in Practice today is as project leader for PCN Action Scotland. Obviously, I'm going to say PCN are the largest threat to the potato industry in the next 1 to 5 years. We're at a point at the moment where we've been losing so much seed land to PCN infections and new PCN infections, and we still are seeing more PCN infecting land as well at the moment. PCN is a problem, but I think it's one of these problems that are very manageable. We have the tools, and certainly through our project we've researched these tools and made them available to different growers and different people across the sector. And as long as we're talking about PCN, it's a very manageable issue now. The best way the potato industry can prepare for the future, I think, is purely discussion at this point, and being open-minded and ready to manage this epidemic. And to be honest, this is something we're already seeing, and we've been so impressed by the sector as a whole, not just the growers, but across the industry, that everyone's really chipping in and acknowledging that, yes, PCN is a problem, but there are resistant varieties that I can use, there are other technologies that I can implement, and there are policy changes that we can engage with through SASA. Our links with SASA through this project have been incredible for demonstrating that actually the Scottish Government really cares about potatoes, really cares about the potato sector, and really cares about PCN as well. They're not looking to overmanage everything, they're looking to ultimately return land to the growers and manage that epidemic. I think some of the largest technology innovations for the potato farming and potato sector as a whole coming through our project certainly are things like our decision support system. This is a tool that will be made freely available to growers. It will help them plant correct resistances into their field. These will help reduce populations, reduce reliance on chemical nematicides, which is a whole separate other conversation to have with the longevity of these on the market. But it will also help us just manage these populations, return land to being used for seed, get it descheduled, or even help increase yields. In addition to the decision support system, we've got a huge amount of work has gone into resistance breeding. There are new resistant varieties, Elland, Amanda, Buster, that we've all been trialling through this project and shown that they have such a good place in Scotland and the UK as table varieties and white potatoes that we can use. And the supermarkets have taken these up as well for sale, but also the processors, which is obviously a huge expanding industry that we're seeing at the moment. So in addition to resistance, once we've got the resistance in our fields and it's been deployed through our decision support system, new technologies such as groundkeeper management. We've been working with Soil Essentials to develop this spot sprayer, and it's a machine learning based system where a camera can identify a potato groundkeeper in a variety of different backgrounds and then switch on a spot sprayer on the back of the tractor and specifically target herbicide control for that groundkeeper. And this is huge because it means that our potato rotations will actually be rotations again. As we see it at the moment, groundkeeper control is incredibly difficult, and it's mostly because we're not having the frosts that we used to have before to actually kill off these groundkeepers. With resistance in mind, we really need to be controlling and managing that resistance, because while it's not been a problem and we don't expect it to be a problem, we do have to be aware that resistant breaking PCN populations may develop with overexposure. Remove the groundkeeper from that problem, it won't be an issue.
My name is Don Pendergrast. I'm Technical Manager for Non-Combinable Crops at Agri. So basically I look after potatoes and horticultural crops. I've focused on doing the trials work around that, so it's sort of doing the research work. So Agri's a national distribution company, so we basically provide advisory services and supporting products to growers throughout the UK. Potatoes is a kind of major focus crop for us, and we'll have agronomists working, across the UK from Scotland down to Cornwall. I think the biggest threat to the potato industry is the development of resistant pathogens and the progress of viruses alongside the loss of plant protection products. So we are heavily involved in doing research trials, kind of practical applied trials. So we're looking at different technologies that can help. We'll lose Mancozeb as of November this year. So we're looking at ways of underpinning the fungicide program with sort of broader support from varieties and also biological type products that potentially could be used to just help manage the risks. And when it comes to virus, we're looking at sort of other options. So we're looking at the idea of using cover crops and partner crops, using things like dyes as well to potentially reduce the pressure from aphid, but also we're looking at potential oil products this year that can be used alongside synthetic insecticides, but could also be looked at. We're looking at them alone and alongside synthetic insecticides, and we're looking at some things we haven't looked at before to see if they might offer some support in reducing the pressure from virus for the seed industry. So we're looking at that this year, and then hoping we can do some more work, pick out some good candidates and do some more work next year on that.